Hello, it's week 4 of season 5 of the Andy Griffith Show. This week's episode title is The Education of Ernest T. Bass. Barney, what's up?
Andy and I are in the courthouse, and we're discussing where we want to go to lunch, and then we hear the sound of the window breaking. And I say to Andy, "You know who's back in town, don't you?" And then Andy opens the door, and he yells out at Ernest T. that he needs to come in here right away. And Ernest T. does that. And then he says he'll explain why he broke the window. He says he's been courting Romina, who's the same girl that he liked back in episode 17 of season 4, called My Fair Ernest T. but she turned down his marriage proposal. Even though Ernest T. got gold leaf on a tooth, and he shaved the back of his neck to try to impress her. He says that she told him that she wanted him to learn how to read and write, too.
So Ernest T. says he wants Andy to teach him that, and next week he'll go back and ask her again. And Andy says, "Ernest T., I can't give you an education in just a week." And Ernest T. says, "Okay, then I'll break every window in town."
And Andy says, "You break another window, and I'll throw you under the jail." And then Andy figures he'll try to help Ernest T., even though I think it's a bad idea. And Andy convinces Helen to take Ernest T. into her 5th grade classroom after lunch that day. That Ernest T. is real disruptive to her class, and she's constantly getting him to hush. And that night, Ernest T. tells Andy he don't like her, and that she's not teaching him anything.
So Andy tries to help Ernest T. learn how to read with Opie's old 1st grade reader, and they make some progress, and Ernest T.'s all excited about the progress he made in school the next day, and he wants to write the sentence that he learned the night before on the board.
But Helen says no, we're doing math right now. And Ernest T. is upset about that. So he gets up in the middle of the math lesson to write his sentence on the board. And she smacks his hand with a ruler to get him to give her the chalk back. And then Ernest T. says that he loves her. And that night he throws a rock with a love note on it through her house bedroom window, so Andy comes and arrests him. And the next day I tell Helen, "We slapped him in the old tin box. That'll cool him off. He's a 1st grade, grade A, #1 nut. He should have been in the Laughing Academy years ago." And then Andy points out that Ernest T. didn't decide that he loved Helen until she hit him. And I say, "You know something? That's right. The whole thing is psychological. Love and punishment. Punishment and love. Don't you get it? It all just says one thing. It's the old mother figure bit. He loves her like a mother. Sigmund Freud wrote a lot about that. And Andy agrees with me."
And so that night, Andy sees Ernest T. in his living room. When he comes home, Ernest T. had broken out of jail, like he usually does. And Andy tells him to leave Helen alone because she is his girlfriend. And Andy reminds Ernest T. that Ernest T. was in love with Ramona.
And Andy asks Ernest T. whether his mother ever hit him, and Ernest T. says yes. And Andy says, "Well, that's when you decided all of a sudden that you loved Helen, when she hit you. That she's just your mother figure. Ramona is your true love." And Ernest T. says all that clears up the whole thing. But the next day, he tries to help Helen with her groceries. He says a good son would do that for his mother, and then he jumps on Andy's deck when Andy tries to talk to Helen. And I say, all I had to do is give him a couple of karate chops, flip him into a corner, and he'd get up and head for the mountains, never to be seen again. But Andy says Ernest T. would kill me. Then he says he's going to try again to give Ernest T. an education. He gives him real quick lessons in geography, arithmetic, writing, reading, and then he has him answer a few questions for Helen in the classroom, and then they give him a special diploma for learning, even though Helen says privately that this is a farce. And Andy tells her it's either this or never be rid of him.
So Ernest T. says he's now going to take his diploma over to Romina and court her. He keeps mispronouncing her name.
And the next day we're deciding again where to go for lunch. And Andy says, "Drugstore?" And I say, "I don't like to eat at the drugstore. Everything tastes like medicine." And we say we get it worked out with Ernest T. and Ramona, but then we hear a window break again.
Oh well, we'll see you next week for episode 5.